That's what we want. We want power and love
Yeah.
combined because one
Yeah.
without the other, it's weakness or abuse. If you want to keep the passion and the magnetic sexual
Yeah.
thing that brought you together in the first place, then yes, men need to kind of find it in their own way. We're not creating enough space for them to step into. We're filling it with directives. This is what I need you to do. I need you to do it like this, and you need to do it like that, and
I don't know
complain.
what you're talking about. Welcome to the Vibrant Couple. Today I have invited Susan Morgan Taylor, who is a somatic sex therapist, to talk with us about mutually fulfilling intimacy. So, Susan, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Please tell us, what is a somatic sex therapist?
So my background is in mental health therapy, holistic healing, and also 25 years of somatic practices such as massage. I was a massage therapist for 25 years. So I actually worked in sort of a traditional mental health setting as a couples sex therapist for over a decade and really discovered that what really tends to work best when you come to helping couples with sexual challenges, and the biggest one that I help couples with is overcoming that difference in sex drive. We see that all the time, and it can just create all kinds of really serious challenges for
Yeah.
relationships. But what I discovered was that just talking is valuable, but it's limited. And I could see where people were getting stuck. I saw the limitations of it. And I started to study somatic practices, meaning experiential practices that use the wisdom of the body to inform the healing or the growth. So it's not just kind of intellectualizing or talking, but actually really learning how to feel, how to notice, and how to actually meet the potential challenges that arise when we're having differences in desire, for example. There's certain things that lead to that in relationships. And I've discovered ways to help couples overcome that are really about experiential practices because sex happens in our body. It's a thing that happens in our body. So we have to be drawing from the experience of the body if we really want to create change in that arena. So I help couples learn how to be connected to the body. I use what's called the 3 Ns. It's part of my Pleasure Keys process that I teach at my couples immersions and retreats. The 3 Ns are noticing the capacity to notice what's happening in the body is step number one. And it's amazing how many of us are like totally foreign to that idea. What's actually happening in my body? And what do I need right now? What would I need so that I could relax or open or feel more enjoyment or feel more connected? What do I even want right now? So noticing is where we start with that. And then it's about naming it, actually giving voice to that thing. What I would need right now is for you to just slow down, or I need to just take a little pause. I need a little break. Giving voice to that. So naming it. And the third part is negotiating. So negotiating is there's actually a lot of different pieces to negotiating. But once we negotiate it, then there's clarity. And clarity is the thing that creates pleasure, it creates connection, and it creates opportunities for many more types of experiences where both people can get what they want without sacrificing themselves, feeling obligated, without feeling afraid of getting rejected. There's a real art form to it, a whole set of skills. And that's really what I do when I work with couples, and a lot of what I teach at the retreats that I lead for couples.
So first, thank you. I'm a little surprised about the word negotiating because the way I interpret it is that it's you against me.
Aha,
And
interesting.
yeah, and somehow we need to find a solution that kind of works for you, kind of works for me.
Mm,
When what I want is I want a solution that works for you, for me, and enhances our couple. And so
yeah.
please say more what is behind your definition of negotiation.
Yeah, so negotiating is really, I mean, a good negotiation is exactly what you just described. It's not one person against another, and it's not about tolerate. It's actually about getting away from tolerating and sacrificing and going along with just to keep the other happy. We're trying to get away from that. So there's really a lot of different layers of negotiation. There can be very overt negotiating, like, okay, here's what I would like to experience. These are the things I want. Would you be willing to provide those or to give those or to do those things to me? And then you have a conversation about, yeah, I'd be willing, except for this part here, and maybe we could change that part. But other than that, like I'd be willing to do these other parts. So that's very overt, and that can actually be an extremely important piece for a lot of couples. But it doesn't have to be like that. Negotiating can also just be, well, I notice that I'm feeling this, and I notice I need this. So now how am I going to go about advocating for that need to be met? And so there's a real art form there. It doesn't have to be overt. It might be, if I'm responsible for my own experience right now, 100% responsible, then how am I going to manage the fact that I'm having this feeling arise and these things that I need? How am I going to now bring that into the relational space so that I can advocate for that need to be met? And that could be as simple as, I'm feeling scared right now. And then I let my partner respond to that. And he might say, well, what do you need, or what can I do? Or maybe I could do this, or maybe I could do that. Right? So that's a negotiation. It's far less overt. That's much more subtle and a little bit more of, like we talked about polarity earlier when we get on the call. It's a little
Yeah.
bit more feminine aspect of just voicing the feeling or voicing the desire. That's a form of negotiation. And then allowing the outcome to be produced from the masculine aspect. So I'm giving my partner an opportunity to kind of move into that polarity and to find sort of the solution to the thing I've expressed. So that's also a negotiation.
So I would call that more a conversation than a negotiation.
Well, I think that's semantics, right? I mean, if we want to parse apart the words, but a good negotiation really is a conversation. That's all it is. A good negotiation is finding out, where do both people stand? What are their wants, needs? What are the limits that they both have? What are they willing to do or not willing to do? Whose desire are we following right now? If you just look at a conversation, a negotiation, it's just about creating clarity. When we have clarity, that's where pleasure lives. That's literally what generates pleasure. And what generates connection is having that clarity. When we don't have that, that's where the problems arise, when there's assumptions being made. We were just talking a lot about that too before we
Yeah,
got on this
yeah.
conversation here. There's assumptions that are made. There's people that are doing things they don't really want to be doing, but they feel like they have to in order to keep the peace or make the other person happy. And so they're shutting down their desires, or afraid of
Yeah, that
expressing their desires. So it's all just about clarity. That's really all a negotiation is. And a good conversation, really ideal, a productive conversation would be geared towards that as well, in my opinion, when we're talking about this topic of difference in sexual desire, when it comes to that. And that's really one of the main things that I help couples with. So that's how I'm defining negotiation in this
got
context.
it. So you and I have different definitions for the word negotiation, but it seems like we are very on par with basically a relationship in which we both take ownership for what's happening inside.
Yeah.
And in some ways, when you take ownership from what's happening inside, you also take ownership for what's happening inside your partner.
Well, that's an interesting perspective. How so? Can you can you clarify that more? How do you take
So
ownership of what's
for
happening
so
inside
for
them?
what I'm seeing is a lot that goes wrong in relationships is basically expecting, you owe me this, you don't do this, you never do that, you. And
Right.
when there is that you, basically there is no connection with myself. So
Yes.
if I learn to connect with myself and I learn to connect with my needs,
Yes.
then can learn to express them in a way you can hear them.
Absolutely. That's a big part of it too. That's the second part really of how do we name, that's the naming of the three N's, right? How do we put that into the relational space in a way our partner can hear it? And I think what you just said is, anytime we're starting off from a place of, well, you this or you that, or
Yep.
I feel that that's a real roundabout way. That's not a feeling.
No, it's
That's
a
a,
thinking.
yeah.
Yeah,
Really,
totally.
I think if we come back, like what you said, if we can get the clarity here first, and that's the noticing. That's why noticing is the first step of the pleasure
Yeah.
process. The first thing is, can I notice what's happening in my body right now? Oh wow, I notice that my heart is beating quickly. I'm a little tense in my belly. Okay, so that's what I'm doing internally with
Yep.
noticing, and then I might find, well, what is it that I need? Okay, I'm feeling a little anxious. What do I need? Do I need words of encouragement from my partner? Do I need to take some deep breaths? Do I need to go take myself on a walk? What do I need right now so that I
Yeah.
can calm down or open or voice what I need. And then the naming of it or the voicing of it, that could look any number of ways. But my partner sure isn't going to hear it very well if I start with a you this and you that, and I feel that you. What he's going to hear a lot better is right now I feel really anxious in my body and I'm feeling a lot of tension in my belly. And I'm noticing that that's related to this thing that just happened a few minutes ago. Like when you said that thing, I noticed that I had this response happen in my body. Very, very different than you, this and that. And he's going to immediately get defensive at that.
Yeah. And
He's not going to
so,
hear that.
oh, totally. And so, what I loved about the example you used is you had a beautiful feminine expression, is you expressed how you felt, and then something that I would love to see more and more and way more is you let him figure it out.
Yeah. Yes. And that's the part where, that takes a lot of trust in his capacity. I see a lot of women in particular who, and it's been me. I mean, I have been in relationships, so I really didn't trust my man. I pretended to trust him.
Yeah.
So what tends to happen if we don't have that trust, if I don't have trust in my partner's capacity to find the way through that, then I'm going to have to do it. And then we're going to neutralize the relationship, or I'm going to be in the masculine and wonder why he's not masculine enough for me. I'm sure you've run into that term a lot. A lot of women
I don't know
complain.
what you're talking about. Both with my clients and personally. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there certainly are times where the direct route is needed. And it's usually a conscious choice when I come at it from I need you to do XYZ right now. Right? That's the
Yep.
direct form of communication, right? And that would be
Yeah.
me drawing from my masculine capacity. But if I want to have more of that magnetic attraction with my partner, then I'm going to be very conscious in how I deliver the expression of the desire or the need. I'm going to be very conscious about how I do it. And if I want to be in my feminine essence, then I'm going to do it from a state of, oh, I'm feeling this thing right now and I'm noticing this. And what I'm really wanting is this, which is gives him the ability then to notice that in me. And he looks at that and says, well, how can I find the solution? Because all he wants is for me to be happy, right?
Exactly, exactly. And so, how did you learn to be in silence until he figures it out? Because
Mm,
it's not very difficult to learn to make the feminine invitation.
right.
It's way, way, way more difficult to remain in there until
Yeah.
he does figure it out. So, how have you learned to do that?
That is such a good point that you make, because you're right. I would say that is the hardest part of this. And I think a lot of it has to do with being with someone whom I trust. And I trust his direction, I trust his wisdom, I trust his word, and I trust his capacity. I think that there's unfortunately a lot of men who really have not cultivated the capacity for that, but also in part because they haven't been given the opportunity to. In our modern days, women, we're taking charge and we know our needs and we're direct with our needs, and we're not really allowing the opportunity for our partners to step up. We're not creating enough space for them to step into. We're filling it with directives. This is what I need you to do. I need you to do it like this. And you need to do it like that. Instead of, can I lean back? Can I sit with my potential anxiety that he might mess up? He might not get it right. He might make a mistake. Can I allow that for him? Because if we don't allow that, he's never going to actually learn kind of the way. Men need to kind of find it in their own way. They need to kind of find it their own way. And if we're sitting there telling them what to do and how to do it and giving direction all the time, we're being their mothers. We're going to put them into a feminized state or an infantile state. And then we're going to wonder why we feel like we're their moms, because in a certain way we've actually generated that through how we're showing up. So it's a matter of being comfortable sitting with your own anxiety and being willing to let him make mistakes while he finds the way, and to give him feedback. If he tries something and it's not the right thing, give him feedback about it, but don't do it with words. Like, you just did that wrong or that wasn't the right thing. Don't do it that way. Do it through your body and through your feelings. Like, ooh, ouch, or ah, or oh, oh. Like, he'll get it. If he's tuned into you or he's learning to be and getting better at that, so that's a quality of sensitivity that a lot of men need to really work on, then he's going to be, oh, that one worked. That worked. Oh, let me do more of that. And I give him more
So,
feedback through my body and through making sounds rather than words and telling and talking and all that.
so you remain in your feminine and you trust that he may not do the things you want him to do, or he may not do it the way you want him to do it. But overall, for the two of you as a couple, it will be much better that he's in the masculine and you're in your feminine.
If you want the sexual turn on, like if you want to keep the passion and the magnetic sexual
Yeah.
thing that brought you together in the first place, then yes, it is really important. Now, it's not, this isn't really into my, for me, it's not about like having hard and fast rules. There's times where I will, like I said, like I'll step in and I will be really direct. I'll be, look, I need this thing and I need it right now and I kind of need it done like that. I will do
If
that
there
because
is
I
an
have.
emergency, yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or if I'm making the choice to, if polarity isn't the most important thing at that moment. But generally speaking, because I want to keep that connection there and I want to feel surrendered into my feminine, I want that more than anything. I am going to just focus on my side of it. Where a lot of women I think get caught up is they're more focused on what he's doing or not doing. Well, he's not being in his masculine. He didn't do this and he didn't do that. And I don't feel trust and I don't feel, well, what are you doing then to generate that? Like if you just focus on your own part of it, like my practice is that I want to cultivate more of my feminine essence and I want to cultivate polarity in this relationship. I'm just going to focus on that part of it. I'm going to work on that part of it. And I'm not going to get my hands over here that he's not doing this or that, or he's not doing his. I'm not worried about that because if I do my part well, by default, it will polarize him into his masculine. It will polarize that capacity in him.
Yeah.
It does. I have seen this work. Like all I have to do is be more relaxed and more feminine than he is at any moment. And someone's got to fill the space. So the difficulty is resisting. Don't fill the space. Resist. I mean, if you want the polarity there, and this is not about manipulation. I see some people try to use this to try to get him to do something. It didn't work because it didn't get him. That's the wrong mindset to come from. It shouldn't even be about that conversation at all. That's manipulation. That is
Yeah.
not like deep, sacred spiritual practice or sacred relationship.
And so what I'm seeing is that you have a feminine sexual essence. You have access to both your masculine and your feminine, but it's your feminine that really nurtures you. And you've learned to be in your feminine and how to invite the masculine in your partner from that place.
Yeah, I would say it's an ongoing practice. I
That's
don't know if we're
wonderful.
ever completely finished, but yes, that's a big part of my practice and where I put my attention and awareness. And I like being in that surrendered feminine state. But I will tell you, I also have a very well developed masculine side. I
And
run a
that's wonderful.
business. I was single for a very
Exactly.
long time. I raised two kids by myself. I've done a lot. And I think that's what makes it feel so nourishing and safe for me to be in a more surrendered state because I know that I can do it the other way. So it's an empowered choice rather than a like, oh, I'm supposed to be surrendered or I have to be dependent or I can't make it on my own.
And so is surrendering and submitting the same thing?
Not in my book.
That's one of the things I believe many women are worried is that for them to surrender to their feminine means that somehow they have to submit.
Yes, and they think it's weak because we think of the word submission, we think of a doormat, and the man is superior, and it's not about that really at all. Surrender it's one of the most powerful energies that we could ever embody to be surrendered
Yeah.
because it requires immense levels of trust and vulnerability. And that is not something to give to somebody or to do with someone whom you don't trust. It's not a place, and I've made that mistake. I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to be surrendered. I don't trust this man, but I'm going to bare my heart and soul and be vulnerable in to my detriment. That was surrendering, but not in a state of trust with someone who had capacity to understand the responsibility that comes with that. When a man opens a woman sexually, he opens also her heart. So I think that men should learn that if you're going to do that, you have a certain responsibility because the emotions are part of a woman's sexuality. You're going to get her love. You're going to get her don't go there unless you have the willingness to be responsible for the vulnerability that she's offering to you. But that's where her energy comes from. What he wants is her energy. He wants her
Yeah.
sexuality.
Yep.
But the feminine energy, and for her to offer that is one of the greatest gifts she can give. But a lot of men and women too, honestly, don't understand the responsibility that comes with that. So women trust men that don't have capacity or aren't trustworthy or capable or willing to take on that responsibility. And men also don't realize that that's a huge gift and a huge responsibility if they're going to take a woman there and open her in that way. So we have to have that discernment, I believe. And submitting it's a different energy. Submitting is, I think there can be certainly conscious choice in it, but it's me abdicating my own authority to bring in someone else's authority rather than me having the authority to make the choice to let go and allow. Submitting is I'm going to not really be in contact with my needs or wants, and I'm just going to allow this person to kind of direct and lead and rule without me really being in touch with what my own power is. Surrender is extreme. It's from a place of power and a place of choice. And that's why it can be so beautiful. Whereas
Yeah.
submission is and I don't mean submission in the BDSM context. I think that's sort of a
Hmm.
different connotation. Submission is sort of like without question, without thought, don't be too tuned into your power. Just submit because you're supposed to, just submit because you're expected to. Instead of surrender is because that's where the beauty is. That's where the turn on is. That's where the energy is. That's where the power is.
So what I'm hearing and seeing with you, how you get more expressive,
I
is
do.
that when you surrender in your feminine, you feel more in your power.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Yes, I would say I certainly feel far more expanded and alive. And yeah, and it feels it is extremely powerful, and it can also be extremely scary. It's really where the edge is. There's an edge there
Yeah.
that can be very exciting, actually, to dance on that edge.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
doesn't
And
always feel
so
powerful, though. I don't always feel powerful in surrender. Sometimes it
So
feels
I want to take
extremely
a pause
vulnerable.
here for the listeners and please look at Susan, how she's radiant right now, because there is something about you being in your power. And so that is
Mm.
wonderful. So when you basically find ways to be in your power, be in yourself with what nurtures you, then you can be in your radiant feminine, which
Yeah.
is magnetic for the masculine. That's what the masculine really wants.
Yeah, and I think that we have to look at what do we mean by power as well, especially when we're referring to vulnerability and softness as a form of power. It's not the hardened, structured how we tend to think of power, because it's usually for the feminine aspect. For women, it's tempered with love. That's what we want. We want power and love
Yeah,
combined, because one
yeah,
without the other, it's weakness or abuse, right? We want the two
totally.
unified. So to be in one's power through surrender, I believe, is knowing that it's a choice. I think that's where the power comes from. Right now, I'm choosing this, and that's why I'm in my power, because it's extremely vulnerable
Yeah.
to be the one who flows with, the one who, in a sense, gives up the need to direct the moment. And that's what you were talking about a little earlier. If I'm going to have polarity and sexual or turn on and magnetism to the greatest extent possible, I'm going to give up the need to direct the moment. I'm going to trust my partner's direction in that.
And so
That's
the
a lot,
piece I want
right?
to, yeah, the piece I want to bring to the conversation is that from the masculine side, and so I have both masculine and feminine, I've developed and practiced both. I have access to both, but there is something for me which is more nurturing to be in my masculine power, my masculine essence. And it is also surrendering. It's for me to relax and surrender into my masculine. And it's also very vulnerable
Mhm.
because any emasculation is felt, 100-fold
Yeah.
from that point of view.
Sure. And
Yeah.
I think what you're speaking to is really, in the masculine spiritual practice to cultivate that polarity. What's also needed is sensitivity. So it's not enough just to be able to see and to penetrate and to hold the space and have structure. If you don't have the ability to feel deeply into your partner and know where she is and what's happening within her internal space, and that's a quality of sensitivity. I think that's what you're speaking to is
Exactly.
that ability to not only hold the moment, but also to feel the moment, to feel your partner. Where do we need to go now? You can feel into her. Where is she Where is she closed? Where is she afraid? Where is she shutting down? And can I help put love into those places to gently open her through her willingness to open? It's not something my partner
Yeah.
is doing too. There's an aspect of that, but it's only because I'm saying yes to, I'm willing to be penetrated. I desire that, and I have the ability of the skill of surrender and a lot of trust inside of that. So there's a lot of dynamics that are going on in this polarity conversation, and really what we're talking
Yeah.
about, sacred sexual relationship. This is really the dynamic of it and how it's practiced.
Yeah, so I love it. So you and I started arguing about the definition of the word negotiation, but we are totally on the same page. It's
Yeah.
basically two individuals taking responsibility and ownership for
Yeah.
what they want, for what they're part, for the polarity. It is learning to be with each other with power with. It is heart and sex.
Yeah, and it's doing this. I want to really bring this out because I think this is really important. This is about it's doing it consciously and not because we're following a script that says you're the man, I'm the woman. So because you're the man, you have to be in the masculine. Because I'm the woman, I'm in the feminine. Because that script gets really tired, really old, and extremely abused. And I see a lot of that, like in some of the sexual communities out there. You see a lot of that. And if that's just abuse at that point. And so really, if this is about what, honestly, at the highest level, what would serve love the most in this very moment? Would it serve love the most for me to take the lead here, for me to be a directive and allow my partner to be surrendered? Is that what serves this moment? And it's a very refined skill. And I think I wouldn't say that I'm some expert at it, but it is something that I tune into in any one moment. And what am I feeling? What's the desire in my body? Because I'll trust that when I feel a desire to be in a more dominant role, let's say sexually, I listen to that. And my partner's very receptive to that. Like he'll
It's a
kind
lot
of,
of fun to do
he's like,
that.
okay, I'm gonna like roll with that. And so there's a real beautiful ability to have. It's like a tango dance. It's like a dance. Any kind of partner dance, I think, is the best thing. Every couple should learn partner dance. To learn about polarity, sexual polarity, go learn partner dancing and learn both roles. So you have
Yeah.
more of an appreciation for what it's like to be in the lead, follow, or masculine, feminine. So we need to have the consciousness around it. And again, it's about getting out of scripts and ideas that because I'm female and I have a vagina, that I have to be in the feminine all the time. And because my partner has a penis and he's a man, that he has to be in the masculine all the time. Because men get tired too. The masculine needs rest, it needs nurturing. It wants to also have the experience of being surrendered. There's balance in everything. You can't always be constantly nonstop in one energy all the time. That's not how nature works. If you want to learn, look at nature. We have seasons, we have cycles. Nature is not always producing. Nature goes into winter, it goes into dormancy. We're not always planting seeds. We're not always tilling the fields. There's times of rest where you let it lay fallow. And then there's times of planting and harvesting and watering and fertilizing. But if you do it all the time, it will deplete the soil.
I'm fully in line with you. One of the things I'm seeing there, which is something that men suffer quite a bit, is they are supposed to take all the time it takes to warm their woman up.
Mhm.
But when she's warmed up, they are supposed to have an erection like that. And this is not the way men work either.
That's
Men
right.
have feeling and their own cycles.
Yes.
And it's really important to learn to be patient with both sides.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's really
Yeah.
sort of this idea that you have to have the eternal erection. And a lot of men, unfortunately, that's the programming that men have. And there's embarrassment if they're not able to stay erect the whole time, when
Yeah.
really that
Yeah.
is so let it go soft. Just let it go. It's not really a big deal. Like it's probably going to come back if you stop freaking out about it. And
Exactly.
it
Actually,
will.
this is the best solution.
And there's other things you can do in the meantime.
Yep.
I share this one all the time with my couples called soft penetration. You don't need an erection for soft penetration. I have resources on my website about that if anybody wants to learn more. But
I
we
will
have to,
link that
yeah,
in the
cool.
description below. Yeah, of
Cool.
course.
Yeah, we have to get away from this idea that just as women need some time to get aroused, well, men also need time to have downtime where their penises are not on the constant erection. And on
Yeah.
erections on demand, that would be awesome. But that's just not the reality of things. So he might need to relax or rest or need more stimulation. So we have to have that working together and less emphasis on whether it's hard or not, and less emphasis on getting to the end game of climax. in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm loving our conversation. I would love to talk a little bit about how you work with couples who have mismatched libido and
Mhm.
mismatched desires.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Yeah, so I lead couples really right now through 3 day, 4 night, 4 night, 3 day immersion experiences. Is really one of the best formats of how I like to work with couples to help them with this challenge. And part of the reason for that is because really, I think it's really a myth. There's this whole idea like high desire, low desire, and get the low desire person to have higher desire so then we can be on the same page. It's really not about that. What it really is about is learning. There's a couple things going on. One of it is the arousal map, right? There's different arousal maps. There's some work out there called the erotic blueprints that I've trained in, and I work with that. And it's really, there's 5 different types. And so I love that model, but it comes from some work by Jack Morin from the Erotic Mind. He talks about erotic landscapes. So we have different ways that our bodies actually become aroused, and in different languages that our bodies speak according to which pleasure map we primarily identify with. So some of it's learning your own and learning that of your partner, and you just learn how to activate that particular map, how to speak that particular language. So we have to be willing to be flexible. We have to be willing to provide certain things that particular archetype needs, or that particular blueprint might need to be fed in a certain way. If it's not my main way, then I'm going to need to stretch a little bit to be able to just be willing to feed that to my partner. So that's one of the things. The other way is that we need to learn these skills of negotiating, which are founded on the 3 N's. We first have to learn the ability to notice the desire in the body. And that's a whole skill set. So I teach couples how to do that. I teach them how to slow down, how to develop the skill of noticing, and then I teach them how to do the skill of the naming of it, how to speak up for, how to voice desire in a way that the other person can hear it, because that's huge. A lot of times, like, people are afraid, like, oh, what if I'm too much, or what if my desire is not enough? We have all kinds of baggage around that part in and of itself. So before we even get to the actual act of consensual touch happening. And I do all non-sexual, by the way, at the outset. We don't even get to sex till like way, way later. So everything I do at these retreats is non-sexual. Everyone's got their clothes on. But we learn how to actually negotiate a mutually satisfying experience, which is highly founded on, first of all, knowing whose desire are we following? Am I following yours, or are we going to follow mine? Because if we don't have that question answered, there's not going to be clarity. Now, it doesn't mean you have to have this 100% of the time, all the time in your sexual relationship. That's not what I'm talking about. But couples that come to me have a problem. They're not on the same page. Somebody won't initiate, or they're afraid to initiate, or they're not getting what they want. Nobody's happy. So we need to learn these basic skills of negotiating the experience. In order to do that, I have to know whose desire are we following, mine or yours. Let's get clear on that, number one. Okay, great. We're going to follow your desire. Great. If I'm going to follow your desire, then I need to know what you want and how you want it. And I'm going to need you to give me lots of feedback while I'm attempting to provide that for you. And I have got to be tuned in with what my limits are. I've got to make sure I'm actually willing to provide that, because I see this happen all the time. Oh, well, he wants that thing, so I'm just going to do it. I really hate doing this, but maybe if I do it more, I'm going to like it. I'm just going to do it. That never works, ever. So we learn how to really honor our limits. So I learned how to know the difference between what am I wanting, what's my desire, versus what am I willing to do or give. These are 2 different states. If it's my desire, that's different than if I'm willing to give something to somebody. And then couples get stuck in that a lot too. Well, he wants that, but I don't want it, so we're not going to do anything. All right, let's pause for a minute. He wants that. It's not what I want. That's not my desire. That's his. But would I be willing to provide that with an open heart? Or would I be willing to provide that kind of minus these 2 little parts there because I feel a little weird about that? So it's about getting to that state within me that I'm fully willing to provide the thing. And if I can't, then we negotiate something that would work for us both. Okay,
So
let's find out.
now I better understand your use of the word negotiation.
Yes.
Is when you are in the play, how can you be really playing so
Mm.
that you explore each other more and more fully?
I love it. In order to play, because I know that's like the name of your work, which I love, couples play together, is so good.
Yeah.
And in order to get to that place where it can be really playful and fun and easy and flowing, because that's what couples, at least the ones that come to me and what I help couples do, like they want sex to be more fun and easier and have more flow and more spontaneity. They want to
Yeah.
try new things, but they just don't know how to get there. That requires a high level of trust. And in order to develop that trust, again, we come back to It says about creating clarity. So if we've gotten really good at these skills on a non-sexual fundamental basic level, when we're in the moment, we're going to be able to trust that moment a lot more. We're going to be able to clarify really quickly if need be. And that's where like the sky becomes the limit. Once we have that foundation built, you can go to all kinds of interesting places that might felt terrifying before or like totally uncomfortable, but now you have the tools and the resources and the skills to be able to literally create that together. And that's really what it's about. That's really how I help couples do that, is by developing those skills. And we start very small. We back it way up. It's not about the getting to sex. That's not what makes it advanced. People think that all the time, like, well, if it's not sexual touch, it's not advanced. That is so not true. What makes it advanced is how good are you at the skills of what I call the 3 N's. Those are the pleasure key, the 3 N's: noticing, naming, and negotiating. How good am I at those 3 things? How resourced am I? How practiced am I? To that extent, the sky is the limit. That's how we get advanced, is by getting good at those fundamental skills.
I love it. And one of the deepest, most intimate practices is just eye gazing
Mm,
that requires to be fully present. And you just mentioned the word that is really key to me is practice.
yeah.
And I think that what you mentioned as negotiation is okay, so we are going to be in a place in which both of us are willingly going to explore. As long as our heart remain open and there is no pain, there is no this, and our boundaries are, and then we're going to play with each other, explore, practice with each other,
Mm,
over time, slowly but surely, so
yeah.
that we can learn to be playful in
Yeah.
those areas that you want to explore, that I want to explore.
Sure. And I think to do that what's lacking for a lot of couples to be able to really go there is an actual framework, a framework for
Eh,
how do you explore and play. We need a framework. And that was the biggest game changer for me. In 2016, I met Betty Martin and her work with the Wheel of Consent, which is a big influencer in the work that I do with couples. That is such a game changer because it allows a structure and the common language for what we're doing and what's happening, how we make it safe and how we keep it fun and keep the space clear. Because if there's not clarity again, then there's usually things happening that don't lead to more intimacy and more fun and more play. They detract from it. So we really need to learn how to create that clarity first.
how much of that is learning to not chase orgasms? If they happen, great. But
Yeah.
this is not about orgasm. This is about being together. This is about being connected, hearts open. This is about pleasure.
Sure. It all comes back to the first thing, which is noticing. Because if I can start to notice, what I'll do is I'll notice, okay, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling that, this is great. I can notice when I get goal oriented, and I can notice what happens when I get goal oriented. I kind of everything else sort of shuts out. I get one pointed.
Tenses. Yeah.
I tighten up. I start to kind of
Yeah.
go for the thing.
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's just a different experience than if I have the goal of not being goal oriented. If that's really my practice and I want to start to have deeper levels of orgasm and connection and pleasure, which I believe are really only possible when we drop the goal of climax, traditional orgasm, which is really climax. Orgasm is another domain entirely, but a lot of people call that climax orgasm. Um, then I would notice that. And I'd also start to notice, well, okay, I'm playing with this. So let me notice what I experience when I am successful at not getting one pointed focus and chasing after the climax. Let me notice what happens in my body, what happens in my thoughts, what happens in my sexual energy. It's a practice of noticing. And that's where at the end of the day, it's all a choice. No one thing is necessarily better than that. We have to get out of that conversation, I believe, as well, that this is good and that is bad. It's a matter of choice. And so, one thing I discovered in my own sexual journey, I did an experiment with that. I'm going to just see what happens if I don't chase climax. And I'm going to do this for, let's just try it for 3 weeks. Every time I had sex
Yep.
with my partner, and he would help me, like, oh, remember we agreed, because he wanted to practice it as well, so we had this agreement we'd help each other not get real focused on climax. Sometimes it would just come out of nowhere. Like, well, that one just slipped through, but it was a very different quality when that would happen versus when I would really go for it. And so from that experiment I was able to notice that I felt aroused like all the time. I felt connected to him all the time. I wanted to be with him all the time. It was a very different experience than when I would really just focus on getting to climax, and I would kind of get tired and get disinterested and feel a little. Sometimes I would actually, yeah, I'd feel a little. If I really paid attention, I felt a little funky.
It seems very interesting to observe your body language when you were talking about chasing orgasm. The second part is you became tense, and then just before when you talked about being in an orgasmic state,
Yeah.
you were so juicy and feminine, and that was wonderful.
Well, thank you for seeing that. Yeah, and I noticed that
Yeah.
that was how I discovered that really the gateway into more orgasmic states and these different types of orgasm, because I started having all different kinds of orgasmic experiences when I stopped chasing climax as the main thing. I just, every now and then I would play around. Well, let's see what happens. I'd go for it again, and I would know, wow, I kind of feel like this. So it's a matter of noticing, and then we get to make a choice. Well, wow, what kind of experiences do I want to have? And from there it's empowered, and there's no right or wrong, but then I can consciously start to cultivate more of what I desire by empowered choice rather than lack of education, lack of knowledge, or default. And the chasing of climax is kind of default mode for most people.
Yeah, yeah. So I've so enjoyed our conversation. That was
Same.
wonderful. Thank you for showing up with your feminine juiciness,
You're welcome.
your skills as a couple somatic therapist. And one thing I found really interesting is one of my New Year's resolution in my own practice is shifting from sex is critical, you must explore, you must, practice it, to shifting from open your heart and do that from a heart-centered place.
Mm,
Whatever happens next. So very interesting. I made that resolution, and then you and I have this fantastic conversation. So thank you, Susan. If this conversation with Susan Morgan Taylor inspired you to liberate more love, please hit the like button below and subscribe so you can be notified when I publish new juicy content. And please share with all you believe would benefit, even if that may be a little uncomfortable. I look forward to seeing you very soon.